valued above all for the poetry of his prose. And for me, personally, I got stuck halfway through Swan's Way, but for me, similar experiences with Dorothy Richardson's Pilgrimage, which I'd recommend to anyone, all 13 volumes. Sadly, there were no more. So we were asked to think about our engagement with poetry for this particular conference, and also as a celebration of Tales and Defence. And that would take far too long, so this is a brief, brief synopsis of my engagement with poetry. I mean, Gerald was talking about the origins of poetry, and when I did my alphabet book with the artist Peter John Skelt, it just reminded me that poetry is all around us from childhood, in things like nonsense rhymes, skipping rhymes, and folk ballads. And so I'm going to read one piece from that book. It's the letter C. And having listened to a couple of other readings, I have to say this is also all about Englishness. And it's from my formative years, which were spent in Lincolnshire. Corn, or finding spaces, to insert a body, a core, as if in sand. Cupped corn, crushed, sinking body, singing cornflower at the end of summer. Corn o tone. Cactus corner. Alexis can spike, can needle the finger that would touch, that would explore a corner cupboard. Capacity to close, to exclude. She keeps a collection that says, look out. John Barleycorn is dead. They came and cut him down. But a bloodless combine has left 3 days stubble and the capacity to cut. You are too cutting and break the code. In my teens, I was massively influenced by Ezra Pound and Imagism, and that might have been partly because there's a line in Desolation Row about Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot fighting on the Captain's Bridge. But we knew all about Eliot, but we knew much less about Pound, so that was an exciting discovery. And it influenced my poetics for a long time to come. Some years later, I wrote this little anti-manifesto statement. And if I talk about poetic practice, I was introduced to the 2-line poem in 1968. And I sometimes think I've been trying to play those 2 notes ever since, like the 6 pianos in Piano Circus, which means that we're always looking forward, she told the interviewer, who wanted adaptations of the classics. It might be the secret of joy, which makes people look sideways at you, like last weekend at the Arnolfini, with Bobby Baker licking her toffee apple, gyrating in a red chiffon dress, and miming, I close my eyes and count to 10. Or it might be the smell of apples in the orchard, the smell of apples in an old woman's damp cellar, the smell of rain falling in the distance, the smell of the entire village, which doesn't want you, because you always want to build on the orchard. And when I came to London, I got involved with the sort of experimental poetry scene, and I discovered there was this thing called projects, which was completely new to me, and it was, you could call it the long poem, but I wouldn't in any way. Linda's not here, so. And it usually involved performance, multimedia activities, and collaboration. And my first real project, it was called Automatic Cross Stitch, and it was all about the fashion industry and women's clothing in North Islington. And I did it with a friend of mine, the artist, Emma Asara. And it began as a performance, eventually became a little book. And I'm just going to read the last poem, which wasn't really part of the performance, but it's more of a sort of commentary on women's writing and also clothing. And it interweaves some lines from Mary Wollstonecraft, who lived in North London, and the description in the V&A of a burqa costume. Mary Wollstonecraft in outer costume. Oh, I should say the printer's devil, for anyone who doesn't know, is the boy who used to come to take the manuscript to the printer, and Mary Wollstonecraft complaining about it. First you will see the purple and the gold. It is not pleasant to have the devil delay the search for meaning. I am distrustful of myself, coming for the conclusion of the sheet before it is written into. The outer garment, the all-enveloping burqa. Had I allowed myself more time, then you look up. I could have written a better book. Then you realise that it is all of a piece. For not having done justice to the subject, with the gold helmet and grille. That's really tiny, isn't it? This is a particularly decorative version, with lank hair, black stockings, and a beaver hat for everyday wear. Looking through a fine mesh gold grille before it is written. And I sort of then became interested in visual poetics, particularly thanks to the American poet Kathleen Fraser. And that became part of the projects as well. And probably particularly starting with the project I did with Tilla Brading, who sadly can't be here this weekend, about the Neolithic stones on Exmoor. And so I've roped in Harriet to help me to do this. So this is called Stone Settings. Per, X,
War,
2,
3,
or
4,
parallel, rows,
rectangles,
double, square,
squat,
shape,
almost
regular,
pattern,
needs,
another
stone,
perceptible,
just,
under,
turf.
in drought, a patch of starved grass will betray it.
In wet weather,
Feel it through soles.
allow,
For
vo, en, res, stones over,
grown,
shale,
e,
d,
composing,
re,
moved,
land,
rovered,
less,
income,
prehen,
pleat,
sybil.
outlier,
Guess the riddle.
no analogy,
Slight,
resemblance to Scottish four-posters,
lack, centre.
a dominant position within the frame.
Some patterns are completely enigmatic. And so it's, as well as it being visual in the sense of being laid out differently on the page, it was also multi-voice, so for another reader. And the next project I did with Tilla was to do with Ada Lovelace. And the other influence that came into my life, perhaps inevitably, was to do with computers and AI. But it began because Ada Lovelace lived on Exmoor. As any of you have watched Country Farm recently, or been misinformed. So it began as almost a kind of landscape project, trying to use mathematics and relating that to the landscape. But I also carried on looking at different aspects of her involvement with what you might call early computer programming. And of course at that time it was mechanical. You had, and it began with the jacquard looms for weaving, and you had these mechanical arms going through punch holes So I did a series of poems based on that, and particularly to do with, rather than weaving patterns, it was to do with weaving birds, because her main interests were music and mathematics, and she had a particular love of birds and called herself the song thrush. So this is thrush, and Harriet's going to read the key words that you might see through the punch holes, which act as a kind of subtext to Ada's text, because I spent a lot of time in archives, talking about ferreting in archives, and my text. So this is thrush. I fear it is a London bird, but something better than a sparrow too. The bird is let out of her cage every morning. She's very tame, although of species inclined to flights and migration. I saw 50 thrushes in 2 low cages to sail in churn
Stone Nest
Passage.
Street.
And they have so
Dark
haunted
spots in my eyes.
imagination. I am dying
From a crying.
from pain of thrushes.
Quit, qui, quit. Quit, qui, quit.
Yes.
It's amazing rapid.
It goes so quick, doesn't it? There's 15 minutes, but there's 2 left, so...
I finished with a piece from my new sequence, which should be coming out as a book before too long, called Black Fence Viral, which began during COVID. There's been so much about the impact of COVID on our writing, and I realised I could get this slow train from where I live through. It's a route I didn't normally go, to Norwich and King's Lynn, and it took me through the Black Fens, and I became obsessed with Black Fens. But it also took me back to my childhood in Lincolnshire, a very industrialised landscape. But I also started using this algorithm, thanks to Stephen Hitchens, the Welsh poet, who introduced me to it, called the Markov chain, which also seemed appropriate in a time of COVID. And there's also a slight tribute to Harriet, who I haven't really mentioned yet, in terms of writing outside, or not. You argue about this. April 21. Delayed by a hawthorn hedge. Red hips shrivel and blacken. Fresh-leaved tree bursts out of the fierce thorn. Riversary of lockdown. The announcer hiccups slightly as words are inserted. What we don't know. Failed in the ploughed field. Flailed ditch. White squeeze of maythorn. A desirable stranger. Or another shape of life. Don't rock me so on my embankment. Rivers of precise white plastic line the fields, and black solar panels, the shape of lockdown. As words are white cumulus clouds in a solar farm, these patterns are what we do best. Or another shape of death, bursts out of the ivy, popped over poplars, hardly propped. He was leaning, not propped at all, not even by those women who tried. Come on, ladies, prop yourselves. All that white squeeze of death. Her name was Diath. She lived near the crossroads, a strange outlier in a bungalow, a desirable stranger in a cold blue sky. Warning, have you taken into account how scared hips shrivel, loving the other, I mean the outside, an unkempt backwater, an unflailed ditch full of white rushes, fresh green leaning for the ploughed fields. The shape of life or another is what we don't know, allowing that to hurry us on, not dredging it bare. Ditch full of white cumulus clouds, new leaf for the rivers of precise women. Thank you.
Thank you.